Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we re-diving into a tense situation unfolding in the Pacific that could shift the balance of power and bring major nations closer to confrontation. China and Russia have been working together more openly in recent years, and now their naval cooperation has caught Japan's attention in a very alarming way. Warships from both countries have been spotted operating close to Japanese waters, a move that Tokyo sees as an intimidation tactic. But what makes this story even more significant is how the United States decided to respond, sending a message not only to Beijing and Moscow, but also to allies and rivals across the world. Japan has always lived in a delicate security environment, with China pressing territorial claims over the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, and Russia maintaining control over disputed islands north of Hokkaido. Tokyo is constantly facing pressure from two powerful neighbors. When Chinese and Russian ships begin patrolling together near Japan's coastline, it is not just a show of force, it's a deliberate signal. It tells Japan that both countries are willing to combine their military presence in a region where Japan has deep strategic interests. The joint naval patrols are not random. They are part of a larger pattern of cooperation between Moscow and Beijing. Both countries share an interest in undermining U.S. influence in Asia and pushing back against American alliances. By conducting drills or maneuvers near Japan, they highlight a key weakness in U.S. strategy. Washington relies heavily on Japan as a cornerstone ally in the Pacific. But when that ally feels surrounded by coordinated pressure, the U.S. is forced to demonstrate its support. This is where America stepped in and made its move. The United States responded by deploying naval and air assets in the region. American warships, along with aircraft capable of long-range surveillance, moved closer to Japan-EC-S waters to conduct freedom of navigation patrols and joint exercises with the Japanese self-defense forces. This response wasn't just military, it was political. Washington wanted to remind Tokyo that it stands firmly by its side, while also sending a clear warning to China and Russia that the Pacific is not open for coercion. For Japan, this situation reinforces the importance of the U.S.-Japan security alliance. Ever since World War II, Tokyo has relied on Washington for its defense. Japan's own constitution limits its military role, though in recent years it has expanded its ability to defend itself and assist allies. When Chinese and Russian warships circle nearby, Japanese leaders see it as an attempt to exploit these constitutional limits. The U.S. response fills that gap by showing that American firepower will stand as a shield. From China's perspective, these maneuvers serve multiple goals. Beijing wants to test American resolve without triggering direct conflict. By partnering with Russia, China gains additional strength and legitimacy. Moscow provides military experience and resources, while Beijing contributes economic and technological influence. Together, they form a partnership that unsettles Washington and its allies. For China, pushing back against Japan also plays well domestically, since Chinese leaders can frame it as defending sovereignty and resisting Western encirclement. For Russia, the motivation is slightly different, but still overlaps with Beijing's. Moscow has been increasingly isolated by Western sanctions and its ongoing war in Ukraine. By operating alongside China in the Pacific, Russia signals that it still has powerful friends. It can show its own people and the world that it isn't to cut off from global influence. Additionally, by pressing Japan, Russia exploits one of Tokyo's most sensitive vulnerabilities. The territorial dispute over the Kuril Islands remains unresolved, and joint naval operations near Japan send a reminder that Moscow can escalate pressure whenever it wants. The U.S. response was carefully calculated. Rather than escalating into direct confrontation, Washington chose to strengthen coordination with Japan and other allies like Australia. Joint drills, intelligence sharing, and visible patrols were meant to show strength without crossing into reckless provocation. The message to Beijing and Moscow was clear. The United States is not afraid to match force with force, but it will do so in a measured way. This balance is crucial because one wrong move in the Pacific could spiral into a larger crisis. Another key aspect of this development is how it ties into the broader Indo Pacific strategy. The U.S. has been working to build coalitions like the Quad, which includes Japan, India, and Australia, alongside America. By highlighting the threat of Chinese and Russian coordination, Washington strengthens the case for regional cooperation. Countries that were hesitant to pick sides may now see that the U.S. presence is essential to maintaining stability. Japan itself has been rethinking its defense posture. In recent years, it has increased military spending and debated whether to expand its ability to launch counterstrikes. The sight of Chinese and Russian ships near its waters only accelerates this trend. Tokyo now faces pressure to modernize its naval and air forces, boost cooperation with the U.S., and play a larger role in defending not only itself, but also the broader Pacific region. The U.S. response gave Japan political cover to justify these changes domestically. The situation also reveals how fragile peace in the Pacific really is. On the surface, no country wants a direct war. China depends on trade, Russia is already bogged down in Europe, and the U.S. knows the cost of major conflict would be enormous. But by conducting these naval maneuvers, each side is testing the other's red lines. Each ship, each aircraft, each exercise carries the risk of miscalculation. If a collision occurs or a warning shot escalates, the entire region could find itself in crisis overnight. For ordinary people in Japan, the sight of foreign warships so close to home is unsettling. Memories of World War II and Cold War tensions remain strong. While many Japanese citizens prefer peace and stability, they also recognize that the world is changing. The belief that Japan could rely solely on diplomacy is fading. More people are beginning to accept that defense spending and closer ties with the U.S. are necessary in a world where China and Russia are willing to show their military strength. For the United States, this episode is a test of credibility. America has promised for decades that it will defend Japan under their mutual security treaty. Failing to respond to Chinese and Russian maneuvers would have damaged U.S. credibility not just in Tokyo, but across the entire Indo Pacific. Countries like South Korea, the Philippines, and Taiwan all watch closely how the U.S. reacts. If Washington appears weak, those allies may start doubting American guarantees. That doubt would only benefit Beijing and Moscow. The U.S. response also connects to its broader competition with China. Washington sees Beijing as its primary strategic rival, with influence stretching far beyond Asia. By confronting China in the Pacific, the U.S. sends a global message that it will not back down. At the same time, Russia's involvement adds complexity. The United States now faces the challenge of countering two powers at once, a scenario that requires careful allocation of military and diplomatic resources. This is why Washington has been increasing its military footprint in the region, rotating forces, pre-positioning equipment, and deepening ties with partners. The goal is to prevent China and Russia from thinking they can isolate Japan or any other U.S. ally. The U.S. wants to make it clear that aggression will meet resistance, but without sparking the kind of direct clash that could ignite a world war. Looking ahead, the pattern is likely to continue. China and Russia will keep conducting joint patrols, not only near Japan but also in other parts of the Pacific. The United States and Japan will keep responding with exercises and shows of strength. The competition will remain dangerous, with both sides trying to prove their resolve without triggering disaster. For now, the situation is under control, but the tension is undeniable. In the end, what this incident really shows is the shifting nature of global power. The world is no longer defined by one superpower, but by rivalries between coalitions. China and Russia are trying to reshape the rules of the Pacific, while the U.S. and Japan push back to preserve stability. The presence of warships near Japan is more than a military maneuver. It is a symbol of the new struggle for dominance. That is why the U.S. response mattered so much. By standing firm with Japan, Washington reminded everyone that alliances are still the backbone of global security. It was not just about ships and patrols, it was about credibility, deterrence, and the balance of power in a region that could decide the future of the 21st century. So while China and Russia may have intended to intimidate, their moves may have actually strengthened the U.S.-Japan partnership and encouraged wider cooperation across the Indo Pacific. This unfolding story is a reminder that in today's world, every maneuver on the high seas carries weight far beyond the horizon.